Welcome to this week's episode of the Presbyterian Reformed Churchman. I have a friend, Chuck Murphy, ruling elder. He will tell us where he's from soon, but we've been trying to do this interview for some months now. And Chuck actually, at first he declined my request, and then I pressured him, and then he said he'd do it, and now it's still been 2 months since our schedules could connect. But I'm really looking forward to this conversation because as we always talk the normal things about being a ruling elder and wanting ruling elder involvement and all that, I like to have it around a specific topic. And Chuck is actually a part of a church plant. So he's a ruling elder leaving his church, going to plant another church. And so we're going to learn all about that because as confessional men, we need to be leading the way in planting confessional churches. And so I really look forward to that, actually. But Chuck, I want to know a little bit more about you, and our listeners do also. So tell us where you're from. Tell us a little bit about your family and what church you're currently a ruling elder at, even as you're planting another church.
Right. So my name is Chuck Murphy. I'm a ruling elder I'm on the provisional session for Ouachita Presbyterian Church in Monroe, Louisiana. I'm from Louisiana. It's actually from South Louisiana. I love this area. It's become home for me.
So tell me about your family. Tell us a little bit about.
So I've been married for 20 years now, actually 20 years this year. I've got two wonderful children. I've got a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. One of them, so they're both brilliant, and they're the joy of my heart.
That's awesome. I have a 15, almost 16-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter, and then I have another son who's, I guess he's 12 or whatever. But too bad we're not closer together.
Kids could hang out.
That's right. So I'm always fascinated by you. First of all, you're a fun guy. I like interacting with you. We're in some different groups that we talk, and I've always just been impressed with how knowledgeable you are and informed you are. And here you tell me you're married 20 years, and you've been in the PCA since you're 90, since the late 90s.
Right.
And you're only, what, 40?
45, yeah.
45, so you're a couple years younger.
45 here in a few minutes.
Right. I don't really give my age out. I'm not quite 50, but I say I'm 50. So when did you come into the PCA? That you've been in the PCA since 1990 what?
99.
99.
Yeah, so I grew up in the United Methodist Church, and I will say is that I don't remember a day that I didn't know and love Jesus. So my parents did a wonderful job of raising me to come to faith, and like I said, I don't remember not knowing and loving Jesus. But when I got into college, there were places where I'm starting to really dig in and read Scripture for myself. And at the same time, another friend of mine, he grew up Southern Baptist, and he started attending this Bible study that was run by a local PCA church, and he was encountering the doctrines of grace. And he started just pulling me aside and going, all right, Chuck, look at this passage. And as he's going and becoming reformed, he is dragging me along with him. Ultimately, though, started attending that PCA church. And
how old were you?
I guess I was 19, and it was kind of the 19 and 20 in that time frame where I was transitioning out of the Methodist Church and into the PCA. And it was a time of explosive growth for me spiritually at that point. Praise God, I did make it through the cage stage without destroying all of my friendships and relationships. But really became attached to that church, and after college, got a job relatively local. Instead of in Ruston, where the college was and where this PCA church was, it was in Monroe. It was elected as a deacon. Actually, shortly, I was in graduate school at the time. I was elected a deacon while I was in graduate school. So, this idea of being a single guy, dating, but a single guy, and commuting 35 minutes to church, it wasn't a big deal. I could still serve as a deacon and do so pretty well.
Yeah. So I didn't know you had your master's degree too. So you are are you consider yourself a manufacturing engineer, industrial engineer, what?
Well, so my master's, well, all right, I'm sorry, this is going to sound terrible, but my first master's is in mechanical engineering.
Oh, there he goes.
So my bachelor's in physics, and by about my junior year, I kind of figured out that I didn't want to do physics as a career, so I started taking a lot of mechanical engineering electives, loved that. And then a couple of years ago, I actually went back to school and got my master's in engineering management.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. Well, and I think that's probably why we got along so well, because my background was engineering, manufacturing, just like you, and so maybe we think a little alike. But okay, so as we get into this, you're currently planning a church now, and that's why I wanted to have you on. And that's an interesting thing because you're a ruling elder at a church who's now on right? You are a ruling elder at the planting church or the mother church?
I guess I'm just on the provisional session of the plant, and because I transferred my membership to it, so. But
you were a ruling elder before. You've been right.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. How that works. So you're not on the.
I'm no longer on the church, the session of the church that I left. So I'm in an ecclesiastical weird land. I'm not sure what it looks like.
Right. Well, once a ruling elder, always a ruling elder. You're on the provisional session under the presbytery or under?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you're still considered. So you can't go to General Assembly and vote then?
Actually, no. In fact, I'm being put up on the committee of commissioners for CDM, and my presbytery is actually is nominating me for a permanent committee as well. So we'll see how that shakes out on that part. But yeah, I'll be on.
But what church? Where's Dominic Aquila when you need him?
Right.
Can I phone him up? Does he
phone a friend? Right.
Phone a friend. Right. This doesn't make sense to me. Wait a minute. I understand how the presbytery could put you on a committee of commissioners. That makes sense to me. But when you're voting on General Assembly, you're saying you're allowed to vote from the floor of GA?
I believe so.
Representing who? Representing what church?
Right now, I think it would be Washita Pres. In fact, I think that's what my name tag is going to say, is Washita Presbyterian Church.
This whole episode might be invalidated.
Oh, no.
What we're saying.
I'm flying by the seat of my pants, brother.
I thought churches had to send their complement of ruling elders, so I'm not sure how you're being sent, but I think it's awesome, and I'm glad I'll see you there. Let's put it that way.
If they don't give me the clicker, then that's okay.
It sounds like you will. Are you? Did you get one of the choice rooms at the actual facility, or you have to stay?
Well, funny story there is that after the trouble with hotel rooms last year, I got home from GA and booked a room in July of last year.
I think you're the person I got that advice from, and I did the same thing.
Yeah,
I did the same. Yeah, I booked for me and my ruling elders back last summer because of that whole thing. Yeah, and everybody that wants to be angry with Chuck and myself for right now because you think we got your rooms. We didn't get your rooms because our booking didn't affect the PCA block. We booked outside of the PCA allotted rooms and had to pay extra for it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it was like another $10 or $20 a night or something.
It was I think it was $10 a night more. And I actually looked at, well, do I release the room and try to rebook? And I said,
that's what I tried to do. I wasn't going to release it until I rebooked, but I couldn't. Within an hour of getting that email, it was full.
Yeah.
And so it is what it is. But I'm looking forward to it. 50th anniversary. It'll be great. It'll be great we'll get to hang out again. Okay. Yeah. Let's get into it a little bit though. So how did you decide? So this church plant is a work of the presbytery, not of the church you're coming from.
That's right. Yeah, this
Okay.
is it's not a
But
daughter plant, as it were. This is a practically speaking, it was a scratch plant, or a parachute plant is what you'll hear it called sometimes. Um, this is, and certainly it's been something that's been on my heart and my prayers for a long, long time. For, well, gosh, almost a little bit more than a decade now that it's been something I've been praying towards to see a new PCA work here in the Monroe area. And I'll start getting a little bit into my personal history here. What had happened back about, I think it was 2004, 2005 time frame, the Monroe PCA Church, which is Auburn Avenue, pastored by Steve Wilkins, hosted this pastors conference. And I actually was in attendance at that conference. I was getting to hear these guys articulate the, quote, federal vision. And hearing some of this stuff, and I'll be the first one to say is that I was very confused and was starting to wrestle with this stuff. The pastor at the church in Ruston at the time, he bought into it hook, line, and sinker, was swallowing up all the stuff with a new perspective on Paul. I remember one sermon that he gave where I think he quoted N.T. Wright probably 18 times, it felt like. But over the next 6 or so years, I'm watching this controversy explode. Not just in the PCA generally, which it did, but also at the presbytery level. And watching that broke my heart. I mean, I can't put it any other way. I mean, and I still get emotional thinking about what I witnessed.
can you explain to our listeners? I mean, I don't want to go into a 5-minute explanation of federal vision or new perspective, but just like in a couple sentences, if it's possible, like what the issue was if somebody's listening to this and they don't know what you're talking about.
So there's a whole lot of things I think that you could talk about. One of the things that you'll hear is this idea of covenant objectivity, for one, okay? And so the idea would be is that if you're in the visible church, then you could be thought of as elect, okay? And there's some other things that kind of get pulled into that as well. There's some distortions, and if you remember R.C. Sproul's famous speech on the floor of General Assembly, he was making a point that this had to do with justification by faith. And one of the things that was getting twisted at times in the federal vision was faith and faithfulness.
Right.
Would be kind of blended and confused a bit.
Yeah. Justification by faithfulness, almost.
Yeah. And when the definitions of words get kind of played with, it's really easy to take people in. It really is. It can really do a number on people that are young in the faith or less grounded. 2011, the PCA, the Louisiana Presbytery folded. It just,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's no Louisiana Presbytery anymore. Not as it was. And so at that time, our church got folded into the Presbytery of the Mississippi Valley. And having to unpack a lot of crap that I had learned and kind of getting myself back to right. And, along the way, asking myself over and over again, watching this mess unfold around me, do I want to be a part of this? And so now we're at 25 people on a regular attendance, and this is essentially, we're having to go from scratch. Yeah, it's like having a core. If you're familiar with church planning, this is just like you're stripped down and all you've got left is your core group, and that was it. The only advantage I think we had was we still had a good church building, and the mortgage was paid off. And for the next 6.5 years or so, we had a bivocational man that we were able to bring on, and he is a guy named Bruce Wilson, and he, to this day, he is probably one of my greatest heroes. and he steps into the role as the pastor of this church for 6.5 years or so. And it's like every Sunday, he's going in and doing chest compressions to keep the patient alive. And in seeing him at work, faithfully, week in, week out, teaching the scriptures, teaching the gospel, he started breathing life back into that church. And, being bivocational, there's a lot of disadvantages with that. I mean, he's got a full-time job, so he's not able to really pour himself into establishing new connections in the community, inviting people in, and that kind of thing. But slowly we started gaining some traction. And we were able to get up to about 40 to 50 people on a given Sunday morning. Anyway, a couple years after this pastor had served for so many years, he was basically telling us, look, I'm about to retire, and we're not going to grow any further unless you guys get a full-time pastor. And actually, October of last year, we were able to call a full-time pastor. And this all at the same time that I'm moving out as a ruling elder to be a part of this new church plant. And I'm seeing in the folks gathered there, I'm seeing probably 4 new families that I had never seen before. And knowing a place that you've been pouring your heart into for so long, and really just praying diligently for, and all of a sudden, there it is. God's faithfulness is just being poured out, and you're seeing fruit being born.
So that's all. So did they, when you told them of your intention a year ago or however long that you were going to go with this new church plant, was there like resistance to that? I mean, obviously the church had just rebounded. They want your family to stay, no doubt. I mean, you have 2 kids, and you're kind of at that great family age where you can build around for other families, and now you're going to go leave for another church. Like, how did you sense the Lord's calling in that, and how was that received?
Well, honestly, so the presbytery announced that they were going to be bringing on going to do this plant, and they announced that like 3 years ago. Actually, yeah, about 3 years ago now, and I happened to be at that presbytery meeting, and I'm telling you is that so I'm with our bivocational pastor at the time. I'm sitting there next to him, and he and I was smiling at him, because this has been something that I'd honestly been praying for. Even in the midst of serving at this other church, I've been praying to see another work in Monroe. And part of it is just for me is that I really believe in that parish mindset, right? I want to be and be able to reach out to the people that are in my community. And it's really, really hard to say, hey, come to church with me. It's only 40 minutes away.
Right. So it's perfect. This is going to be in your area. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, it's going to be my area. So, all this said is that, so when that time came where we actually launched Sunday morning worship services. Instead, not just a Bible study, which we were doing Sunday evening Bible studies. We were launching Sunday morning worship services on Easter this past year. And I had a long talk with the pastor in Ruston, and saying, this is the most painful thing I've ever prayed for a decade, and here it is, and I'll be as honest with him. I said, I'm terrified of it, and he said, and this is before we were seeing these new families coming in, and he actually told me, he said, Chuck, You've been praying for this. Have faith that God's going to take care of us like he has for the last decade. God's good. He's going to take care of us. You go and work at this new place. And he asked me, he was like, are you seeing fruit in Monroe? Yes. Go to the labor.
So what's the team like? What is the core team like for you guys? And what's this? You're almost in it a year now, right?
Yeah, so we've had Sunday morning worship services for about a year. The session, primarily it's the TE here in Monroe and myself that are on the ground, as it were. The other members of our provisional session are in other parts of the presbytery. So we're the two faces of that are on the ground here. But it's the support we've gotten from presbytery has been wonderful. And the community that we were starting Bible studies and whatnot right before COVID, and then COVID hit, and we went from just like as far as attendance to our little Sunday evening Bible studies, we had sometimes 40 people, sometimes more. If you kind of looked at the total number of people that were in and out, it would have been over 50 people. When COVID hit, it stripped all but about 15 or 20 of those away. And both the TE and myself, it was so discouraging, but at the same time, you keep plowing.
So why I'm having trouble with the timeline. I thought you guys, okay, because you only started Sunday services a year ago.
Sunday services and this Easter.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're saying this work has been going on since 2020.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But you didn't. But you were still worshiping at your church.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I got you.
So there was that transition period where I'm still on Sunday evenings when we don't have anything here in Monroe. I'll still go and drive to Ruston because it's still family.
Yeah. So who's preaching there every week? There's a TE that's part of this?
Yes.
Is he considered the church planner, or he's just supply?
Yes. Yeah, he's the church planner. He was the presbytery brought him on as the church planner here in Harris.
Did they go through the assessment process? So he was through M&A or something. Yeah.
So he did the assessment process, and I know that he really does regard that highly. He thinks very well of that process.
Yeah, well, I've been impressed with it myself. They really do a good job of assessing the man and his family, but toward an area. And we just started a work here sometime last week, and that presbytery meeting I was in at our church here just before this call, I think he said that they have 50 people worshiping there now. Yeah. I don't think they've gone to Sunday morning yet or so. So I mean, but that's like, yeah. So it's exciting. It's an exciting thing for the presbytery. We've been our presbytery's been a while since the last time we planted a church. So I'm glad. So I'm excited for you guys because I know that's.
And to kind of put a little bit of flavor in it, I mean, when we launched on Sunday morning worship services, we had, generally speaking, if you looked at Sunday night, we had probably 25 to 30. And when you make that transition to Sunday morning worship, you're going to lose some of those people because, their schedule is built around Sunday night. And so, but when we made that transition, we probably had right at 25. And here in the last month or so, we've been typically averaging between 40 and 50. Wow. And so just even in this 1 year's time frame, to see that much growth. In fact, yesterday, Harris and I were teaching a new members class. And so...
who's receiving the members? The presbytery? Or you're able to receive them...
The provisional session is, and Harris and I have been allowed to act on behalf of the entire session to receive the members. And so,
because are you the only member of the session? Will you and Harris that are attending the church?
Yes,
and the others are part of other churches.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of them's about 2 hours away, and the other two members of our session, they're about 45 minutes, or maybe 50 minutes away. Yeah.
What sounds, why I think this whole thing is awesome is because even when I was in South Florida and we planted a church, the church that I was at was the mother church for a daughter church. The problem was there's always a couple problems that in my I'm not a church planner, but in my understanding of the situation. One is that you have enough, it's not simply attendance, but giving or tithing attendance so that it can be self-sustaining. Right. And then the other thing is, do you have people in the church that can be ruling elders, because you need an actual session, Right. And what's just really neat about how you guys are doing it is, well, you're a ruling elder, Yeah. So you got one of them. I don't know how many. I don't know what the minimum requirement is. Is it 3 or 2 or?
I'm not absolutely positive.
I've never seen a number. Yeah.
I know that you have to have a plurality of elders, but I don't know if there's anything more than just 2. But no, and actually one of the things that, so I got to teach last night about, okay, what is it to be Presbyterian? Mm-hmm. What does that mean? And towards the end of it, I basically was telling these people that, are in attendance, I said, look, when we move to particularize, you will get to vote on your elders. And I said, that means that, you will get to vote if you want to keep Harris as your pastor. It means if you don't want me as an elder, I'm not an elder. I'm not going to be an elder in this church. And, that's okay. I mean, you have the right to choose your elders. And that's, now I'm telling these people, and I believe it with all my heart, is that that's important, that they get to figure out who they want in their on their session.
Yeah, and it's empowering too. So is that area? Is there other Reformed presence in that area? OPC, ARP, any?
There's an ARP church that is about 30 minutes away, and there's a EPC church that's actually in town. And of course, then you have also Steve Wilkins's church as well. And I don't know how closely you want to associate it with Reformed faith or not, but yeah. But as far as a real Reformed presence in this area, it's not a lot. It's really just not a lot.
So do you find then, because again, with the church we're planting here in our presbytery and the one that I've experienced with in South Florida, when you're going into it, I mean, first of all, you want new believers, right? You want converts. Of course, that's what everybody wants. But typically what happens is your core group, and you're getting people who have stopped going to church, or people that you hope they believe in the vision. You hope they're not just but if you're not in a typically Reformed area, like you're teaching polity and theology and sacraments and the whole thing from scratch. It's very hard to get, again, to even be able to develop an elder if they're, especially if they're not the infant baptism might be an issue, how That's they right. view, all those different things. Are you facing those kinds of?
Believe it or not, I mean, so one of the things we talked about with actually, like I said yesterday, teaching this class, is that, Harris gave a very quick run through of this is what this is the basic content of the faith that we're going to be addressing. Gave that, we're sinners, and it is God's sovereign action that brings us into relationship with Him. But we've been I'll say he has been very intentional, and I have been as well, is that I'm borrowing a phrase that Harris used, is that we are theology driven, not method driven. Mm-hmm. And the last thing that we want people to feel like is that we did a bait and switch on them, right? We get them in there with pizzazz, and then we go, oh, and by the way, here, let me just sneak in what we believe. No, it's we're upfront about it, but at the same time, and Harris and I are both. I mean, I'm a very strongly confessional person, and I think our interactions would probably give credence to that. Harris is as well, but at the same time, we're not white knuckled about the confessions, right? We're not holding them so tightly that the only thing we can do with them is bludgeon other people, but rather we open up and say, look, come and see, examine these things for yourself. And you open yourself up to establish relationships. And there's this old trope that you'll occasionally hear. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Mm-hmm. And the reality is very, very much in line with that. If you love people, if you get in their life and you just love them and show them Jesus, I mean, there's going to be times when there's disagreements that are going to come up, but they will trust you because they know at the end of the day you're bringing them to Jesus.
Yeah, and you know what I found in my context, and this is an established church, we're 75 years old, but when we get new people, it's theology they're not used to hearing. It's a gospel they're not used to hearing, and they just love that it's rooted in the standards, and they're coming from churches that they've never heard Westminster Confession of Faith, but they know when they hear from George, they know they're hearing the Bible as the standards has interpreted it.
Right.
And that is comforting to people, that it's not spiritual mismanagement. It's not spiritual abuse. It's not, they might not like what I just said, but they know that it's not George's opinion. I just don't give my opinions up there. And it is comforting to people. It is.
And the thing is that a lot of times, so a lot of the people that we have in our church, some of them were de-churched, some were...
That's great. Praise God.
Yeah, I mean, so we've got people from all kinds of different backgrounds, and it's wonderful. And so, no, we're very much aware that people have different starting places with us. But they, as you guys said, they know what they're going to hear. And we always, always, always point them back and say, look, if there's a controversial topic that comes up, and it hadn't been a real big occurrence, but if there's a controversial topic, we come up to and say, well, let's look at it together. Mm-hmm. And, for example, baptism, infant baptism. If someone's saying, well, I don't get it, well, let's explore it together. And if they can come away with it and say, well, I don't necessarily agree with Chuck, but I at least know why he is saying what he's saying, and I see where he's coming from in the Bible to say these things, to believe these things, to teach these things. And there's a place that we just have to be comfortable and say, you know what? I'm going to let the Spirit do his work. I'm going to let the Spirit take over from here.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. And even when I was saying about, like, they know that George is going to preach the Bible through, like, that, like, the reason I'm saying that is not because I'm, like, tooting my own horn. It's because that's what they tell me. Multiple different people have told, we know what we're going to get with you, Right. And what's so cool is we have a couple here that is, the husband's doesn't have any kind of church background. The wife had a little bit, and they're really on fire, but they don't really know theology, and they're learning, and yet the way they're learning is, I mean, my gosh, there's so much on the internet, right? So who do you know who to listen to or not?
Who do you trust?
Right. And so whenever they want to meet with you, I'm like, yeah, come on the office, let's talk. And they don't always agree with what I say, but like, it's not like they're upset about it. It's like they know where I'm getting it from, and they're just trying to process it. And I love what you just said. That's right. We give it to them, and then it's up to the Holy Spirit, you know? And it's a beautiful thing to watch, man. I love it. I love watching them develop and seeing how the Lord sanctifies them and grows their faith, and how they've understood things that I've said in sermons that people that have they're sitting in the pews for 30 years miss.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, and this is something that we're very intentional about, is that we're planting an ordinary means of grace church, and we're upfront about it. It's, in some respects, it is the most boring and wonderful thing that you could possibly do. It's the preaching of the word, the prayers, the sacraments. We're not doing anything special. We're not throwing glitter from the ceilings and or any of these other spectacular things.
Smoke machines. You always, whenever you have say a list, you add the smoke machines.
Right. The smoke machines with the glitter to make sure that that it's the Holy Spirit that's coming, right?
Right.
So, but then we get into each other's homes for roughly 6 months. I mean, every other week I'd have I have a study in my home or going through a book. It's now switched off to another guy's home, but all the ladies are meeting up at my house every other Wednesday. Being hospitable. God uses those ordinary things to do miracles.
Yeah.
And
no, that's great. So what's what's y'all's timeline? Are you funded? I mean,
well, so we're still dependent, probably more than, I think we're probably about 1/3 self-sufficient right now as far as funding. But as far as
one third's coming from the people attending, and the other 2/3 are from churches and donors.
That's
outside
right,
the church. Okay.
Yeah, and but with the growth that we've been seeing over the last couple of months, I'm actually anticipating that we may be able to be moving more towards maybe 75, even 100%, possibly by the end of the year. That would be my prayer, my hope.
That's amazing, because you'd have to triple what you're doing right now.
Yeah. But at the same time, a lot of these people that are just coming on, they're probably not giving yet, and that's but they're still at that point of, do I push my chips in yet? Right, so to speak.
Right.
But I've been
I've often heard the old model was like a 3-year startup for church plants, and what they're finding is, particularly in cities, I don't know what your context is, I don't know that area at all, but like they're having to extend that out, both for the reasons of they just don't have the financial ability to support themselves, but also because they don't have the theological background among the people, so they don't have the ruling elders yet. But it sounds like you may be on your way quicker than that.
Right. I mean, as the plant started 3 years ago, and I would think that we're probably going to be on that 5-year plan. And that was actually kind of what aligned with what was kind of presented to the presbytery, was that that it would be launched in self-sufficient probably in 5 years, and that COVID certainly, I mean, it kneecapped us hard, right? All of a sudden we went from a good size gathering, and all of a sudden it gets stripped away, which I think that was also kind of looking back. I do think that was God working even in the midst of that to, one, test us a little bit, but also establish the right community and the right atmosphere for that community. I've had people, so, for example, this class last night, one of the couples, they had 3 children, but they were, but another couple in the church, they said, we'll keep your kids while you go to this class, you know? And, you know, after the class was all done, they brought the kids up, and I turned to this particular lady and said, "Hey, I want to thank you so much for taking care of their kids while they were here." And she's like, "They're family. You know,
That's awesome.
Of course we did this. They're family." And that's the kind of stuff that, you know, we've gotten, that we've had the privilege of seeing God do that kind of, building that kind of community. And it's it's a beautiful thing.
So how old's the pastor of the TE?
He's actually, I think, 46, I think.
Okay. So right around your age.
Yeah.
Is he has a family?
Yes, he does. He has 3 kids. I'm trying to think. I think the youngest is in 2nd or so grade, and then the oldest, I think, is 6th grade.
Okay, that's great. So you guys, you got all the way from elementary to high school with the two of your families. I mean, that's what families want to see. Families, you know, it's always hard to get the first couple.
Well, and I have the joy and privilege of picking up some little babies and toting them around on Sunday mornings. Before worship. It's the best thing. Yeah, yeah.
So what encouragement would you have for REs hearing this? And let me just, again, in my context, I've been in 2 PCA churches.
Yeah.
I started off as a member of the church I would actually eventually get ordained in. And the hard thing about, like, we wanted to plant a church, the one in South Florida, because we had a lot of members coming from this area that was probably 20 miles away.
Wow, yeah.
And in South Florida traffic, that's a long haul. It's a half hour at least, maybe 40 minutes. And they just did not want us to plant a church in their area because they just loved our church. And so it's like, come on, we could multiply, you know. Yeah. And here at Meadowview, where I'm at now, even though we haven't had the conversations since I've been here, but about maybe 5 years before I got here, so maybe 10 years ago, they were looking at planting a church, a PCA church in the city south of us, which is twice the size of our town, and no PCA churches down there. And the same thing, where all these people were coming up from that area, and they just did not want to plant a church there. Not the session, but the people that live there, because they loved our church. And so what ends up happening is, when you find a church and you love a church, it's very hard to leave it to go be on a core team. Right. And what I know is church planters don't just need a bunch of disgruntled people leaving their churches and thinking that the church plant is going to solve their disgruntled thing.
No, you're absolutely right. The baggage you take out of the other church, you're bringing with you to the new one.
Right. Right. And so, and what that means, though, is that people who love their church, even though it would really make sense for them, and the Lord could really, again, we know God doesn't need any of us, but He used us, really use them because of the circumstances and everything else. They just don't want to leave, you know.
Well, I think one of the things, and this, I'm taking a little bit of a note from something Harris said in our new members class, is that the phrase that he uses, that we're planting pregnant. And that is what we are envisioning for our church, is that 10 years from now, we want to see another plant in this area. And I would encourage, for those of you that are in established churches, always think of yourselves as pregnant. Always. That doesn't mean that you've got to, do everything. Like, your church doesn't necessarily need to go fly solo and plant a darling church, but it does mean that we need to have a mentality that is saying that God's sheep are out there. God's people are out there. The statistics in America right now, even if you're in the buckle of the Bible Belt, the statistics say that on a given Sunday, no more than about 20% of the people are going to be in a church pew. Right? And of the people who are not, of that 80%, you might have another 20% that are the Christmas Easter Christians, right? So there is there are 60% or more people that have not gotten to hear the good news of Jesus Christ on a weekly basis. They're not a part of that. And of those people that are attending Christmas and Easter, how many of those people are not hearing the good news of Jesus Christ preached to them faithfully, even on those 2 Sundays a year that they do attend? The fields are the phrase that Jesus gives us, the fields are white for harvest.
Yeah. I love your heart, man. I love your passion. Because it's not just about you're going to get a church in your area, so you don't have to drive 40 minutes. It's you want to see the Great Commission in action. You want to see people come to Christ. You want to see change lives, and we know that we have the answer. His name is Jesus, and we get to serve him up every week.
Yeah, I mean, what better thing is there than what we have as a privilege to for what is we don't say it's about us. How much of a burden does that take off of our shoulders? It isn't about me. It's not about George. It's not about Harris. It's about Jesus. And we get to point people to the best person and offer him and be able to point to say there's salvation. We know that you're hurt. We know that you are a failure. So was I. So am I. I'm still broken. I'm still, to use all that language, I'm still all those things, but I've got Jesus.
Man, that's awesome, Chuck. Well, I think that's our time. You're Harris is blessed to have you. I would love to have you on our session, and so I'm excited. I'm excited to see you at General Assembly again. I didn't know if you'd go again, and so that'll be great. We'll see you in Memphis. See you
there, brother.
At the actual resort. Where'd you stay last year? Because I did see you at the hotel.
Oh, I wasn't in the main hotel, but I was in one of the other ones that was right there.
Yeah, because you were there. We were hanging. So, well, good deal, man. This is great. Tell the people the name of your church plant again, so they can keep you in prayer. Maybe who knows? Maybe people want to look you up and help contribute to it. But I know you could use the prayers. So.
Oh, absolutely. Washita Presbyterian Church. We're in Monroe, Louisiana.
Okay, perfect. Well, that's another.
And if you're ever in town, swing by. We'd love to see you.
Yes, I don't know if I've ever been to Louisiana, so I will. Oh no, I definitely have. Never mind, but not as a Christian. So,
well, I'll tell you what. You come back, I'll make you a good gumbo. How's that sound?
Okay, that sounds good. I love that. Chuck, thanks for being on. We finally made it happen, and this was great. This was another episode of Presbyterian Reformed Churchmen. If this is a blessing to you, or these conversations seem to be giving you good ideas, encouraging you in the Lord, share it with other ruling elders, and also like it on iTunes or Spotify or Google Podcasts or our YouTube channel. Thanks again, Chuck.
Have a great one.
You too.